1874, York Council wanted to build on this site, but tests carried out on the land showed that cholera was still present in the soil, and all plans for the redevelopment were halted. George Lehman, one-time chairman of the North Eastern Railway Company, Member of Parliament and 3 times Lord Mayor in York. The man we credit with bringing the railways to York, George Hudson. He inherited some £30,000 from a distant relative. He used the money to buy shares of the North Midland Railway Company and was shortly after appointed director of the firm. Following his initial success, he set about building his railway empire, and by the 1840s co-owned over 1/3 of Britain's railways. He was given the title of the Railway King and rose to political power as well, becoming Lord Mayor of York on several occasions, as well as Conservative MP for Sunderland. However, investigations into his business activities by the likes of George Lehman highlighted the fact that, among other things, he had been bribing MPs and selling company shares at inflated prices. Hudson was a disgraced and ruined man and fled to France, where he died penniless. On the other hand, the statue we see now of George Lehman was a far more respectable figure. He became Lord Mayor 3 times. If you look straight ahead of us, there's an archway. If you go down there, you can visit the National Railway Museum. It's a large museum and it's on both sides of the roads. In front of us, you can see the magnificent facade of the Royal York Hotel, built in 1878 by Thomas Prosser to accompany his new railway station. A few years ago, the grounds of the hotel were excavated by archaeologists live on television as part of a Time Team programme. Here they found the remains of a Roman cemetery under the lawn. Their finds consisted of 3 skeletons belonging to a young man, a mature woman and a 4-year-old girl. Statue of George Lehman, standing there just overlooking the station, making sure his trains are going out at the right time. The large red brick building that stands on the right-hand side is the old North Eastern Railway Company headquarters, of which Lehman was once chairman. It was opposite this landmark that the first railway station was located. By the architect Thomas Page, who had just finished work on Westminster Bridge in London. The bridge was built to link the town centre to the new railway station and was championed by the Railway King himself, George Hudson. On the left-hand side, with a conical shaped roof, we've got Barker Tower, once known as Death Tower. This is where bodies were sculptured out of the river, placed in there. It was used as a mortuary. Relatives of the bodies were then contacted for identification and then taken away for burial. Approaching our museum garden stop. Any passengers wishing to visit the Yorkshire Museum, Betty's Tea Rooms, and main shopping area should come right here. Straight ahead of us is York Minster, the jewel in the crown of the city, the largest Gothic cathedral in Northern Europe. The history of York Minster can be traced as far back as AD 627, when King Edwin and his court were baptised by the priest Paulinus in a small wooden structure near the site of the present church. It's the fourth church to be built on this site. The building we see today took 252 years to build and was started by the Archbishop Walter de Grey in 1220. It was completed in 1472. During de Grey's reign as Archbishop, the Minster witnessed its first royal marriage, one of only three that would take place again. Look closely at the tracery of the Norman doorway, known as the Heart of Yorkshire. And it said if you kiss your loved one below the doorway there, below the heart, your love will last forever. In 1251, Henry III's daughter, Margaret, married Alexander III of Scotland in the Minster. They were followed in 1328 by Edward III and Philippa of Hainault, and then in 1961 by His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent and Miss Catherine Worsley, who were married in the presence of the Queen. Visitors to York Minster today can climb the 275 steps to the top of the central tower, or go down into the undercroft, treasury and crypt, as well as visiting the main body of the cathedral. Mess of the Yorkshire Hussar Regiment and named after their Colonel-in-Chief, Earl de Grey. The buildings were used to hold dances and other public events, and you may still catch a glimpse of the magnificent ballroom through the second-floor windows. One man who used to play the dance was John Barry, 5 times Oscar winner, and James Bond composer. He was born here in York, as was Dame Judi Dench, another star of the James Bond films. Welcome aboard this York Pullman historical tour. Let's take you on a journey back in time. We are now in St Leonard's Place. This is your closest stop to York Minster, Visitor Information Centre, York City Art Gallery and access to the city walls. The street gets its name from St Leonard's Hospital, at one time the largest medieval hospital in England, founded sometime between the 10th and 11th century. The original hospital was dedicated to St Peter and stood alongside York Minster, where it was the role of the canons to administer help to the sick and poor of the cathedral community. Following a fire, the hospital was moved to its present site and in 1137 was rededicated to St Leonard, a saint with a reputation as a healer. The hospital fulfilled various roles. It cared for more than 200 patients, provided shelter for pregnant women, looked after the elderly and educated more than 30 choristers from the nearby cathedral. Money and food were also distributed at the gates of the hospital to the poor of the city, including many of its leper houses and the prisons of York Castle. By 1287, St Leonard's had become the wealthiest hospital in England, thanks largely to the tax exemptions granted to it by the King, its patron. The key to the hospital's wealth, however, came from contributions of the local farming community. Ever since the reign of King Athelstan in 936 AD, the farmers of the diocese had been forced to contribute 20 sheaves of corn per plough to help with the upkeep of the institution. This continued until 1469 and explains why the hospital had sailors on its payroll. These were the men that transported the corn along the River Ouse to the hospital. Despite surviving the Reformation, bad management eventually forced the hospital to close, and for a time the site was used as a royal mint. Archways and walls belonging to the hospital can still be seen inside the Theatre Royal today, with the remains of the chapel and the undercross still visible inside the museum gardens. Fans of the programme Time Team may recall them excavating this site live on television in 1999. On the left you can see a magnificent red brick building known as the King's Manor. The King's Manor was built in around 1270 to house the Abbot of St Mary's Abbey, which is located in the museum gardens behind. Following the dissolution of the monasteries in 1539, the abbot was evicted from his home and the building became the headquarters for the Council of the North. Henry VIII visited a number of towns and brought with him his fifth wife, Catherine Howard. Many believe that it was here in York that Henry found out about Catherine's infidelities, which would eventually lead her to execution. Another monarch to stay at the King's Manor was James VI of Scotland. James stopped here in 1603 as he travelled to London to be crowned King of England. James's reign is perhaps remembered for the gunpowder plot of 1605, when Catholic conspirators attempted to blow up the king as he sat in the Houses of Parliament. The man whose job it had been to light the fuse that day was Guy Fawkes, who was born here in York in 1570. A year after James's visit, York suffered the worst outbreak of plague in its history. Over a third of the population died, and many people blamed the visit of King James and his Scottish followers for the outbreak. Today the King's Manor is home to the University of York, but visitors are allowed to wander around the grounds or visit the refectory for a nice cup of tea and other refreshments. Next door to the King's Manor, on your left, we have York City Art Gallery, built by Edward Taylor to house the Yorkshire Fine Arts and Industrial Exhibition of 1879. The gallery is open daily from 9 AM till 5 PM and is free of charge to visit. Featured in the art gallery is William Etty, the most famous artist to emerge from York. It is his statue that stands outside the gallery. Taught by Sir Thomas Lawrence, Etty was elected member of the Royal Academy in 1825 and was famous for painting daring nudes. What made his work all the more scandalous was that many of the